Talks between Israel and Lebanon have just concluded in Washington, D.C. These U.S.-brokered negotiations mark the two sides' first direct diplomatic contact in more than 3 decades. The Lebanese government is hoping that the talks will pave the way towards an end to the war between Israel and Hezbollah after weeks of devastating Israeli strikes on Lebanon. Israel is focused on ensuring the group's disarmament. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that Tuesday's meeting is about laying the ground for future negotiations. And just in the past few minutes, we've been hearing from the Israeli ambassador to the United States. He's been a part of those talks. Take a listen.
Talks began with a statement, very encouraging statement, Secretary of State Rubio. I was honored to sit around a negotiating table with His Excellency Michelle Issa, United States Ambassador to Lebanon, and to Her Excellency Nida Ibrahim, the Lebanese Ambassador to Washington. We discovered today that we're on the same side of the equation, and that's the most positive thing we could have come away with. We are both united in liberating Lebanon from an occupation power dominated by Iran called Hezbollah. Lebanon is under their occupation, and we are suffering from their constant barrages of missiles and terror attacks trying to cross our border. We talked about a number of things, and most importantly, the vision, the long-term vision, where there'll be a clearly delineated border between our countries, and where the only reason we'll need to cross each other's territory will be in business suits to conduct business or in bathing suits to go on vacation. We made it very clear that the security of our civilians is not up for negotiation. That is understood by the government of Joseph Aoun. And I must say, this was a victory for sanity, for responsibility, and for peace. Because the head of Hezbollah warned the government of Lebanon yesterday not to participate in these talks. And the government of Joseph Aoun bravely said no to Hezbollah. And this is the beginning of a very strong and fortified, consistent battle against Hezbollah. They are weakened as they've never been, and together we'll continue to rid the threat of this Iranian proxy, which is so malign and so malignant in the region.
Now, Israel is still attacking southern Lebanon, even as those talks were occurring. Strikes have killed more than 2,000 people in Lebanon since the beginning of March, and more than 1 million more people have been displaced from their homes. Al Jazeera's Obaida Hitto is live in southern Lebanon. We'll go to Obaida in just a second. Nida Ibrahim is in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. First, we speak to Mike Hanna. Mike is at the U.S. State Department in Washington, D.C., where those talks, direct talks, have been happening, the first in decades. Mike, what are you able to tell us at this very early stage? I mean, we know the talks only just ended a short while ago, but do we know, with any level of detail, what the ambassadors actually talked about?
Well, we do not know precisely what was talked about, what the exact tones of the discussion were. What we do know is that these were very much preliminary discussions aimed at building a base to continue attempting to get some kind of agreement together between Lebanon and Israel, a process that could take months, if not indeed years. But we heard there from the Israeli ambassador, sounding somewhat optimistic, and interestingly enough, saying that we discovered today that we, he means Lebanon, are on the same side of the equation. That's the most positive thing we could have come away with. The Israeli ambassador implying that Lebanon shares Israel's desire to curb the activities of Hezbollah. What is one of the issues that may well have been discussed is how the Lebanese government can regain full sovereignty over its country. No doubt Israel would have been talking about the need for security guarantees on its northern border, but the exact nuts and bolts of the discussion we do not know. What we do know is that this is just the beginning. It is at an ambassadorial level, relatively a low-key diplomatic level, though it was chaired by the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, showing how important this agreement would be to the U.S. in its broader efforts to tampen down the atmosphere, the violence in the Middle East.
Let's go to Al Jazeera's Obaida Hitto, who's live in Tyre in southern Lebanon. Obaida, we're going to talk about these talks and how they're perceived in Lebanon in just a second. But before we do that, I understand that there's been a strike not very far from where you are, an Israeli strike, that is. What can you tell us?
That's right, Cyril. Just a few minutes before getting online with you, there was a violent attack by a drone on a vehicle, we understand now, that was driving very close to where we are inside the city of Tyre. There are injuries reported. We've been hearing ambulances coming and going since that strike happened. And it's a very concerning strike because the area where we are in currently has a lot of women and children, families that are displaced from some of these areas where Israeli troops are present near the blue line, and people are here in this city thinking that they're going to be safe from these kinds of strikes, but that's quickly turning out to not be the case for thousands of people that are still here in Tyre. Many of them don't have anywhere else to go. Some of them were in Beirut after the Beirut strikes. They tried to rejoin some of their families. People are moving around constantly here in southern Lebanon, trying to find a place that they can consider safe. But for most people here in Lebanon, they can't seem to find that place. And everybody that I've spoken to tells me they don't feel safe anywhere.
So, Obaida, we have two things happening in Lebanon at the same time. Two realities unfolding simultaneously. One is the one that you just described, and that is the war between Israel and Hezbollah. Israel has invaded southern Lebanon, occupies parts of the Lebanese territory, has displaced more than 1 million people, killed more than 2,000. And at the same time, the Lebanese ambassador is, as we said, talking with the Israeli ambassador. So at the same time, there is the beginning of some kind of negotiating process or some kind of discussion between the two countries. How do Lebanese people feel about that?
People are having really mixed emotions about this point. This is a very important point for Lebanese people, for Lebanon as a country. It's been decades since there were talks between Israel and Lebanon. Currently, the Lebanese constitution doesn't recognize Israel as a state, and it actually recognizes the Lebanese people's right to resist the occupation of Lebanese territory. And now that the government has reached out to Israel, asking for an opportunity to discuss things, people are reacting in different ways. People want a ceasefire. People want to be able to continue living their lives without having to worry about being attacked, without having to worry about rockets falling over their heads. But at the same time, they don't want to accept a de facto occupation of their land. And this is a conflict that goes back for decades. Remember, from 1982 to 2000, Israel was actually occupying this territory while Lebanese citizens were still living here in Tyre and the surrounding areas. There were actually Israeli troops, Israeli intelligence, and Israeli institutions occupying this land. It wasn't until 2000 that ended. People don't want to go back to that, and they want to be able to live freely and safely. But they're not sure. Many people here in Lebanon are not sure if this is something that Israel can guarantee them. Even if Lebanon carries out this disarmament campaign that Israel is so adamantly asking for the Lebanese government to actually fight Hezbollah, which is going to drag the country, according to many people that I've spoken to, towards a civil war, which they don't want as well. So Lebanese people feel like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They don't have really good options right now, but what they really want is a stop to this violence, a cessation of hostilities. But even that, so far, is nowhere near in sight.
That's the Lebanese perspective. Let's try and get the Israeli perspective. Nida Ibrahim is in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, covering Israeli affairs from there. Nida, so Israel, as we said, two things are happening at the same time. Israel's talking with the Lebanese government, but at the same time, they are waging a very kinetic war against Hezbollah, which is just another way of saying they're dropping bombs every day on southern Lebanon. What does Israel want out of its talks with the Lebanese government?
Well, Israel wants one thing, Cyril, and one thing only, which is the disarmament of Hezbollah, and they want the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army to take on that responsibility and take on that role. As we've been hearing from certain military officials talking to Israeli journalists, they were saying that maybe that would be difficult without conquering all of Lebanon, without occupying all of the country. But that is not something that is easily done. That's why we've heard the Israeli defense minister and others talking about the importance of occupying lands in southern Lebanon, saying that they will continue with their efforts to disarm Hezbollah, even if that is proven difficult. But now we see the pressure on the Lebanese government. And as we've heard just now from Obaida, it's not something that is easily done in a country that has so many sects, that has so many complexities. But Israel knows the complications and how costly the pushing of more troops into southern Lebanon is. So it tries to keep that front open. It tries to keep that war being waged, specifically that Netanyahu did not achieve all the war goals he promised the Israelis to do. He promised a great victory in Iran. He promised to change the regime, to do so many things that he could not eventually commit to when President Trump announced the ceasefire and the talks. So he needs this front to keep going, although there are many analysts warning of a fatigue in the army because this war, as the troops keep pushing further and further into Lebanon, these troops are incurring losses. Just today, we've heard the announcement of the injury of 10 soldiers, 3 of them critically. So this is a battle that the Israeli forces are trying to maneuver. First, they have the communities in northern Israel to appease. They have to tell them that they are working towards achieving the goal of minimizing the threats coming from Hezbollah against these communities. But at the same time, that is proving more difficult. So they're hoping that these talks will achieve that without committing to a ceasefire whatsoever.
Al Jazeera's Nida Ibrahim reporting live from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Obaida Hitto in Tyre, southern Lebanon, and also Hanna at the U.S. State Department in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much to all of you.